Hi everyone, it's Penny Black and Jill Foster here with a new PB&J video. And today I am super excited to be kicking off a series of videos called Start Stamping. And in today's video we will be making a set of bookmarks featuring some of Penny Black's newest stamps and a sentiment from their collection called Cherished 2023. So here's just a little peek at a couple of the bookmarks that we will be making today. And before we begin, just a little note about this series of Start Stamping. My goal with this is really to share my creative process as a professional designer to help you start enjoying your hobby with less decision fatigue, to start collecting products that you'll use and love, and to start using your stash of things you may have already purchased. And I'm hoping by sharing my creative process that actual process will inspire you as well as the products and projects shared. So when I start creating a project like this, the first thing I do is start selecting products, and I gather limited supplies. So I have just like a little photo box here. So whenever I start a new project, I put everything for the most part for that project into that box. So I decided the first thing I wanted to do is to feature this sentiment stamp set by Penny Black. This is the new Blessing set. Then I also pulled this bookmark die from my stash. And then I pulled some floral or bird stamps, very springtime look that I could put on the bookmarks. And I was not concerned at all with the size of these. I actually really like using a larger stamp on a smaller size project because it gives it a whole new look. So here are the ones that I have pulled. Now I received these as prototype stamps from Penny Black, so I don't have the original packaging, so I just store them in envelopes. But if I had the original packaging, I would just store it in there. So I am just pulling these out, showing them to you. I do have a list and link for all of the Penny Black products used down in the YouTube description box below. And this is what I like to do. I find that if I limit my supplies, it's easier for me to start. And the first step is just picking out the things I love and that I know I want to try to use. I don't have to. If I get going and I don't use one, no big deal. And if I get going and I need to grab something different, that's no big deal either, but this is a starting place. Next, I usually start die cutting. And for me, just sitting and die cutting is a decisionless die cutting session. So it's just relaxing. I turn on a show and I do some die cutting. I also trim down any papers if I know what I might be using. So I'll cut a whole bunch of the bookmark, put it back in the envelope, put it back in my box. I cut down several of this size bookmark, put it in an envelope, and put them back in the box. I can come back to this at any time now and have the next step done. Then I move on to stamping, and I like to try to do my stamping like in batch stamping. So I have a stamping session where I can just do a whole bunch of stamping. Again, very limited decisions, which helps with decision fatigue. And I've already got the products in the box, and then I can just pull them out and stamp. Now I wanted to feature this particular sentiment set. That was kind of my starting off point for this project. So I am stamping it with Versamark ink and sprinkling that with Ranger Liquid Platinum Embossing Powder. And I love how this turned out. This was my first time using this embossing powder, and it is really beautiful. So I went ahead and heat set that. I did all of my sentiments, and then I went back and stamped all of my floral images. And I am stamping those with Toffee Crunch Memento ink. I find this gives sort of a no-line watercolor look with there still being lines there because I really don't like when I'm struggling to see what I'm painting. And so I find if I stamp this a couple times in my MISTI stamp positioning tool, it's there, but it isn't quite as dark as like a black outline. So after I have my stamping session, I now have a whole bunch of bookmarks stamped and ready to go. Very few decisions, but it was fun and gets that creativity going with just that stamping. This is also nice if you work in a small space because you can work sort of with the same supplies and then put them away and be ready to move on to the next one. So after my stamping session, these are the bookmarks that I have, and I'm just kind of showing you there in the light how pretty that embossing powder is. and that sentiment set. Those all came from that Blessings sentiment set. And one more here. Now in my creative process, once I have done that die cutting session, the stamping session, now it's time to just relax and add color. I really like using watercolors, and so I will reach for watercolors. You could reach for whatever you love, whatever brings you joy. I'm using Distress Ink Reinkers used as watercolors. I just put them on a palette. I have a paintbrush and my paper towel nearby, and then I am ready to paint. What's nice about this too is that you could leave this out. So you could have like a TV tray or one corner of your craft desk with all of these stamped and ready to go with your paints out. And if you only have a few minutes or a half an hour, you could just sit down, paint a little bit, and leave it out and come back to it. And before you know it, you will have actually started really using your supplies, really having some completed projects that are fun. With these bookmarks, I think they make a really great gift because people could use bookmarks. At least I know I can. I still read regular books, not everything digitally. And either way, they're just fun to have for yourself or to share. You could give someone a whole set. You could give just one if you're in a book club, one to each person. You could also follow the same process but do your stamping on a card if you prefer to do a card. So again, I'm painting those with Distress Reinkers used as watercolors, and I will have all of the exact colors used listed down in the YouTube description box below. In fact, I'll have all of the supplies that I've used on these listed down in that description box below. And then the penny black ones will be listed as well as linked to our online store. I'll add, I believe I started there with Evergreen Bough, and now I'm adding just a touch of peeled paint, mixing that in there. But like I said, you could paint this with whatever you have on hand, or if you like colored pencils, if you enjoy markers or Copics, you could follow the same design process and even the similar layout for your bookmarks and just paint or color with whatever you love. So once the background is dry, I'm going to go in and add some color onto my flowers. You can see when I first dipped the paintbrush into the Distress Ink Reinker used as watercolor, I put that where I want it to be the darkest on the petal. Then I rinse off my paintbrush, dab it on a paper towel, and go back and blend that out towards the edge of the petal. And that sort of lightens it up as it extends out and gets you that dark to light shading and gives that flower some dimension. It also helps if you leave just a touch of white at the tips of the petals. Sometimes I forget to do that, and if you do, that's no problem. But I do find it helps, especially on these with that lighter color stamping for the flowers. If you leave a little bit of white, it helps it to really keep that dimension and keep that look of the original image. So again, just putting the darker colors, so straight from the Distress Ink Reinker in the palette to the area where I want it darkest on the petal, rinsing off my brush, patting it on the paper towel, and then blending it out. So when I go to sort of blend that out towards the edge of the petal, I've rinsed off my brush to take the ink off of it, and I've patted it onto that paper towel so that it's not too wet. I really don't think I could paint these like this if I didn't have that paper towel there. So if watercoloring has been frustrating for you, sometimes that can be because you just have too much water going. So just have a little folded up paper towel handy, and maybe that will help that for you. You can see I use mine quite often, and I realize that's not always in my videos, that portion. It's hard to fit everything into view and not be too far away from the painted image, but that's definitely an important part of, for me at least, of painting with watercolors, is having that there to pat off the brush so when it comes back to blend, it is just not dripping wet. So after I have painted all of the bookmarks. They're pretty much done, but if you want to add any finishing touches, here is an idea. You can go ahead and use a background stamp like this letter background and just very lightly stamp that in the background. I don't apply the ink evenly across the stamp, just here and there, so it sort of fades in and out of the background. And I like to use the MISTI stamp positioning tool so I can do multiple impressions and sort of build up the color. So I start lighter and build it up darker. I also am using a Faber-Castell PITT Artist Pen for these very fine stems. I do not have a steady hand to paint those or the patience to paint those, but I find with this really fine tip marker, it's like a journaling size marker. It is much easier to just trace those. You could also leave them as they are. I really think they look okay, but just to make them pop a little bit more, I'm going back and adding that. And that completes the set of bookmarks. I'm going to give you a look here at all of them on camera, and then I'll pop up photographs for you as well. These were so fun to create, and using that creative process, it was really easy to start. It wasn't an overwhelming project, and it could be done over multiple days if you wanted, or these really go pretty quickly that you could do them easily in one sitting as well. That embossing and that beautiful sentiment set, I think, make these extra special. And of course, it's so fun to be using all these springtime images. I am starting to get spring fever, so it's definitely not happening outside my window, but it can be happening here in my little crafty space. Now, this start stamping video is part of a series of 10. So if you like this video, please be sure to subscribe to our channel, give this a thumbs up, and even hit that bell icon so you'll be notified when the next start stamping video, number 2, will be coming out so you don't miss any of them. I thank you so much for joining me today, and if you stay here, you will get a look at all of those bookmarks one more time. Happy stamping!